together.
You saying have a spotlight?
Yeah, you just pick her and you blow her.
Oh, yeah.
Pin, this is a pin.
Yeah.
Pin her to the top. You just can't see it. Yeah. Yeah. Can you hear me now, Walter? Hello? Every day to touch other, same me, relax, and
All right. Again, for those that weren't here for my pre-announcement, welcome to our conversation today. Palestinian adventurers, I will say, that were on the ground in November are here to share information with us. And I'm just going to do brief introductions, and I'll let them kind of introduce themselves as they come up. First, I'll mention Waltrina, Dr. Waltrina Middleton. Reverend Waltrina will be joining us via Zoom. She led this excursion. She's the executive director of Community Renewal Society. She pulled folks together, and when she first mentioned to me, probably a year before they left, I was like, Palestine? Palestine is getting crazy now because this was like after the Hamas massacres on October 7th. But she is a testament to a woman of faith. And she pulled together this group of people. They went over there, they gathered information that they'll be sharing with us today. The other person, well, the second person that won't actually be with us is Lawrence Mentor. He's a young man that grew up in Trinity. He's in seminary right now. He couldn't be with us today because he had to start class. But he did send us a video recording that we will be sharing. The other two folks that are with us, Candace Bell, Minister Candace Bell, you all see her, if you're members here, on Sundays on the regular. She serves here as the minister for youth and young people. But she ventured on to Palestine because, let's face it, there's a lot of incredible impact on youth and young people over there. And she'll be sharing her insights with us. And then finally, my good friend, Kevin Tyson, was on the trip. He's a board member at CRS, as well as very active, and many of you know him, as far as his work here doing justice ministry and various ministries here at Trinity. So Candace and Kevin, if you could join us, we will kick this off. So one of the things I want to do is a quick commercial. You know, this kicks off Justice January here at Trinity. And I think somebody warned me I wasn't sounding clear. I probably wasn't talking directly into the mic. Better, right? All right, thank you. I'm still learning. I only spent 12 years as a director of multimedia here. So my name is Darrell Brown. I serve here as the director for social justice here at Trinity, as well as IT. So kind of a split role. I'm excited every January. This is our 8th Justice January. We have, awesome. We do a variety of events. This is the first event for this January. Coming up next Saturday, we'll actually have some testing, app testing for the Supreme Court here in Illinois. We got a grant from them to kind of provide access to people to, really they call it access to justice. And basically what they try to do is provide easy self-help for people that may not be able to afford attorneys, for things like evictions, it could be child custody, and what they'll be doing this Saturday is actually testing some online apps. And then starting on the 12th, and I'm just going to do these 3 events, we will have a portraiture exhibit from artists from Palestine and the African diaspora. So that should be exciting. It will be up here at the church from January 12th to the 19th, and then on the 19th, we will actually bring in some of these artists and have a conversation with the artists led by our artists in residence. So that's my commercial. Today, we will be sharing conversations with the folks that were on the ground. I'm looking forward to it every bit as much as you are. And with that, I'm going to kick it off with Reverend Dr. Waltrina Middleton, who is joining us via Zoom to kind of give us an overview of the trip, how perhaps it came about, pretty much whatever you want to offer, Dr. Middleton.
Hi, greetings to everyone and a blessed and happy new year. I ask your forgiveness for my absence today in person. My little girl turns 1 and I am hosting her birthday party, but I would be remiss if I was not with you all, even if just by audio over Zoom. I want to give greetings to my beautiful Trinity family, Pastor Moss and First Lady Moss, and to the panel assembled, and to Brother Darrell for inviting me to be able to share witness. I have been hosting delegations to Palestine for at least 10 years now. My first delegation experience began when I was a seminarian myself, with very little understanding about the extent of the crisis and the violence against Palestinian bodies. And I was very grateful that I had the mentorship and teaching of Pastor Wright, who once he found out that I was going, pulled me aside to share some insight and to give me some notes on what you should have an eye and ear in tune to see and hear and to watch. And it's because of that, um, being pulled aside when I made my first trip, I was able to see things that I'm pretty certain I would have missed. I would have missed without his guidance, and that was the extreme level of apartheid that was taking place right before my eyes, that was accepted and normalized and without any accountability, especially from the West. And when I came back from that trip, I was transformed in a way that I said, I will, going forward, only come if there were extensive intentionality in making sure Palestinian voices uplifted, heard, celebrated, affirmed, and also Palestinian led. And that was the beginning of my journey. But then on my next trip, um, I did just that, being fully immersed in Palestinian community. And also there was a delegation of South Africans who were a part of that experience. Um, and that was the first time that I had a chance to be in dialogue with an international voice that was unapologetic in their solidarity with Palestinian through over the years. And the Palestinian friends that I made on that trip said how important it was to see the South Africans and to know that in the diaspora that there was partnership and a commitment to fight for their liberation. And so that transformed me once again, so that when I came back, I said, going forward, I will host delegations that reflected my community, so Black, Brown, and Indigenous led sojourns. And so the last trip that I took before the recent one was a group of university students from all over the country, including those from the Black Hills, those who were committed to the water resistance movement in the Black Hills, water resistance and water justice movement in Flint, Michigan, and across the country, those who were committed to the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think that that um, really was significant, so that there was visibility of Blacks, not just in the diaspora, but Blacks specifically in North America and Indigenous community. And so I was grateful for those who traveled with us most recently. And not only did we have a beautiful delegation of 12, our delegates were fully integrated in the planning and in the resourcing for that conference, leading workshops, having intimate conversations about the oppression against Black, Brown, and Indigenous bodies in the US, leading worship in very sacred places in Bethlehem and Ramallah and beyond. Um, and so for me, outside of the statistics that many of us have already come to know, that more than half of the population of Palestinians have to date been displaced, been disinherited, and have been victims of of genocide. And more than half of those numbers are women and children, unarmed women and children. And so now more than ever, there is a great urgency for there to be solidarity in our movement. When we see the parallel between the suffering of Palestinians and the suffering of Black bodies in the United States, the weaponization, the militarization, the tools of militarization that's used, that I see in Palestine resembles what I saw as an activist in Ferguson, Missouri. And that's not an exaggeration. When you talk about the criminalization of Black bodies, let alone the murder of Black bodies, this is what we see happening in Palestine. When we see the struggle that Black women face and children face on trying to uphold the principles, the values, the customs in their community and in their homes because the men have been stolen, the men have been murdered. The challenges that we see in the dynamics in our country are quite comparable to what we're seeing in Palestine. And so it's more than a notion that we are in solidarity, but that we're able to see ourselves in their movement and to understand that our fight against lynching, our fight against apartheid, our fight against Jim Crow, and certainly our fight against the culture of violence on every level, including murder, is their plight and it is our plight. And I often quote Angela Davis, who stated that we cannot begin to be serious, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, we cannot begin to be serious about Black liberation if we are not conscious and committed to the liberation of Palestinians. And so that is my inspiration and motivation to not be silent and to find by any means necessary ways to use my body, my mind, my spirit to challenge the systems of oppression that marginalize Palestinians, to help to chip away at those walls of oppression, literally, as well as the other systemic and systematic ways that they create walls to harm Palestinians. And I guess the other things that I will say is that the the determination of Palestinian spirit. We just celebrated Kwanzaa. It just reminds me of just all of the principles of Kwanzaa. I see it exhibited in the heart and spirit of Palestinians. When you literally have gates that are strategically placed throughout your community to lock you in so that you cannot make it to a hospital in the moment of an emergency, because if they deem you are a threat, we're going to close these gates and you cannot get by. That is apartheid, that is genocide. When women have literally died at those gates, giving birth in labor pains, needing medical attention, but because those gates are closed, those gates to those walled communities are closed, they're unable to get the help and resources and support that they need. Can you just imagine water being weaponized in a way that when a system like the illegal occupying system of Israel decides we're going to turn a sewage system back into your community so that when you're walking through your community is piles of feces and the stench is so great that it's unhealthy, that it becomes a public health issue. That's apartheid and that's genocide, because these are things that chip away at human life, maybe not with the immediacy of guns, militarized warships and things of that nature. But when every aspect of your life is created to say your life is not worthy to be in the land of the living, that you're not worthy to have access to education, to have access to healthcare, to have access to water, and to have access to freedom of movement, freedom of choice. That level of oppression is apartheid, it is genocide. And so that is why it is important that when we have the capacity, or if you feel called to go, we must go and see and bear witness, and we must come back and tell the story. And I'm very grateful for the panelists who are there because they were brave and courageous in accepting the invitation to call to join us on this sojourn. But they also were very active delegates, making presentations, sharing in worship, praying with the community, being present when those who were suffering. CRS was among a group of organizations that helped to rebuild homes that were demolished by the illegal Israeli military. And before we were able to return on our last delegation, all of those homes were demolished. And so imagine having to pick up over and over again to keep rebuilding your home as an act of resistance to say, no matter what you do, I'm going to rebuild. And I'm going to continue to hold the keys to the doors of my native land because we do believe that one day we will return. And so we lift up, especially at Trinity, the great Ma'afa, where our people, our ancestors were murdered or killed during the Middle Passage. And they also hold the key. We talk about the doors of no return. They talk about the keys to return. And so there are many parallels in our narrative, painfully so. And we must remain committed to the struggle because Palestinian freedom is the freedom for all who are oppressed in the diaspora. And it is our obligation as Christians that we believe that we follow a Christological moral values. If we behold those Christological moral values, then we also believe in social justice. We also believe in fighting and in being in solidarity for freedom for all. Thank you again for allowing me to be able to share those reflections with you today.
Thank you so much, Reverend Waltrina, for pulling this whole thing together, as well as participating with us today. I know you might have to leave a little bit early, but your presence is very much appreciated. Next, we have...
Thank you. Love you all so much.
Thank you. Okay, so next we're going to have a short video from Lawrence Minter. I mentioned he's a seminary student. He's a child of Trinity. His family is a Trinity family for literally generations. I was excited for him to participate in this, and we're just going to go to the video.
Hey, Trinity family, what's up? My name is Lawrence Stephen Minter. I am sad I can't be there with you all today in person as I'm making my way back down to Atlanta, Georgia, where I'm a student in the Master of Divinity program at the Campbell School of Theology. But super grateful to have an opportunity to share more about my experience on the Solidarity Pilgrimage to Israel Palestine. For starters, I'm extremely grateful to the Community Renewal Society for their assistance, for the opportunity and the support to be able to make such a trip possible. Without them, truly wouldn't have been possible. Also, I'll start with why I went. I didn't know much about what was going on globally. I would say I started off just very ignorant to what was taking place, and nothing but God actually on the campus. October 7th, 2024, I happened upon a vigil that was taking place on campus, hosted by some Jewish students on campus, and it was there where I first did a lot of learning about what had transpired on October 7th, 2023. I named that to say my entry into the experience was in a way grounded by the Jewish perspective of what was taking place, and I think that allowed me to enter with a certain like level-headedness, but also compassion for both sides. To have some brief context about what has been taking place, and a huge part for me was also just seeking council. Of course, I was quite careful about whether or not this was an opportunity I should pursue, and I felt like the Lord answered me very clearly that this was for me, that this would be something that would be very insightful. I was fortunate to speak with Pastor Moss about his journey and experience, and he was able to recommend some literature for me, like particularly Decolonizing Palestine was a great book that I was able to scratch the surface of, learning a bit more about what settler colonialism is, what Christian Zionism is, you know, and what are the sort of forces at play and at work, both contemporarily but also historically in this space. Ultimately for me, while I was very reluctant initially, I had my hesitations, I felt that this global experience would be so enlightening and helpful for me, not only as it pertains to myself as a follower of Christ, and what it means to be a person of faith at a time when people's theological viewpoints and interpretations are being utilized to justify genocide, to justify war crimes and violence against people. I think now more than ever, I just felt compelled to be a part of doing that deconstructive work, to recognize for myself, how do I contribute to systems of oppression? And so that is both spiritually with my theology, but also making sense of American privilege and really making sense of what it means to be America, period, fundamentally. And I think it's harder to get a grasp of what that really means until you step outside of America, right? Until you understand how much the American fingerprint and influence is truly widespread. When you understand that our taxpayer dollars is funding the war. it's funding war in many different areas. What that made me realize was that how accountable we are, how responsible we are to being a part of the change, to speaking out and raising awareness about what's going on. The trip was very transformative because it gave me a ground level view of what's going on, a deeper insight into the Palestinian struggle. I mean, as you all hear and have heard possibly already, we spoke with folks from the Muslim community, we spoke with Afro-Palestinians, we spoke with Jewish folks. A big draw for me was being able to deconstruct my own theology or decolonize, right, in my own mind, and make sense of what it means to be American, you know, what it means to be in this land. And they're just not only that, you know, so as you know, you're unpacking my identity as a Christian, my identity as an American, my identity as a black man, right? And so all of these positions hold both, you know, privileges and in many ways, but also structural, you know, systematic disadvantages. And so the parallels between just like the Palestinian liberation movement and the Black liberation movement theology were just so consistent and blatant. And they're also, you know, both have their distinctions as well. So I want to share a piece of when we were crossing through the border, what my experience was crossing particularly from the border and leaving Amman, Jordan, into crossing into Israel. It goes like this. He runs his fingers through pages filled with reflections of me, journeying through my journal, all in the name of security. He will close it back, returning it to its rightful place in my possession, declaring it safe, Despite the words and worlds apart they've traveled, despite the power in my pen, he does not know the weight of what is in his hands. If he really knew, I would not have made it through. I would have been held back. My words declare weather.
All right, thank you, Lawrence. You're not here, but we appreciate hearing from you. Now we're going to begin our interactive part of our conversation today. I'd like to bring Kevin and Minister Candace up. So first, I'd like to give you both the opportunity to make an opening remarks and maybe introduce yourself a little more. I'll start with you, Minister Candace.
Hey everybody, I'm Candace. I am a current seminarian at, okay, is this better? All right, I've been talking with kids all morning, so my voice is a little, but I'm a seminarian in McCormick Theological, and I have been here on the pastoral team at Trinity, maybe about 2 years now, and very, that's it, right? Okay. Yeah, so you said just introduce ourselves. I'm about to go into my whole spiel, right? And so
Opening remarks. Opening remarks.
So I'm very much like Lawrence. I didn't know much about Palestine. I would hear a lot. I would see a lot on the TV, on the news, but I didn't quite understand. And so when the opportunity presented itself, thanks to CRS and Sabil, who sponsored our trip. I would not have been able to do that without them. And so I just was excited to take this opportunity to see firsthand for myself what exactly is going on so that I can form my own thoughts and not be conditioned to think how the media or government wants us to think. And so I ran to the opportunity to do it. And my life has been forever changed because of it.
Kevin?
Hello? Okay, so my name is Kevin Tyson. I graduated from McCormick Theological Seminary, where I actually met Candace, and have been doing justice work in New York and in Chicago, particularly now in Trinity, for a number of years. I'm the treasurer of Community Renewal Society, and be honest, this trip was actually sprung on me. I was supposed to go while I was in seminary, but obviously I had to turn that down. And then by happenstance, I get an email with the instructions, what I needed to do to go. And that was before I even said, I'll go. But that's okay. That's okay. But under the leadership of Dr. Middleton, and then these beautiful sisters and brothers that we traveled with, talk about a transformative moment. And I just want y'all to park for a quick minute. Remember the word Hairgate, because we're going to talk about Hairgate. And as funny as that sounds, that was a real experience that we had under occupation. But one of the defining moments, and I want to leave time because I know there's a number of questions, and there's a lot of stuff that we have to unpack. But a defining moment for me was when we were at one of the checkpoints, and we were stopped by a soldier who said he could not let us through until he got permission from his commander, because he said they were not told that we were going to be in this particular section of Jerusalem. And while we were standing there, little girl, maybe, couldn't have been more than 7, 8 years old, was looking out the window of one of the buildings that we were between. And she just yelled out, "Hi, what's your name?" to Reverend Waltrina. And Waltrina's leaning over to one of our interpreters, like, okay, how do I answer her, whatever, because she didn't want to disrespect the girl. But the conversation took place, and they exchanged names, and I exchanged names with another girl. And then the young lady just said, we called Reverend Waltrina Wally. And she said, okay, so call me Wally. And the girl looked down and said, I love you, Wally. Now, what you have to picture, and picture has 1,000 words, and we have a number of pictures. But so we're at a checkpoint, and this young girl is looking down at us. I don't know whether she was Palestinian or whether she was Israeli. But she saw the Uzi that this soldier had while we're at the checkpoint and yelled, "We love you." That to me defined in the midst of occupation, in the midst of oppression, the resilience, the fact that she felt emboldened enough to say, "We love you." And there was so much more, and we can say, what a 7-year-old is thinking or not thinking, but there was so much in that really defined for me the calling to be in the middle of the mess. One of the things that Fannie Lou Hamer talks about, is she's saying, there's no point in our saying, I'm not going to get caught up in the mess. But honey, if you were born in America with a black face, you were born in the mess. This young girl was born in the mess. And that set the tone for me, and I think all of us, to know exactly what we were dealing with.
Thank you, thank you. So on October 7th, 2023, Hamas invaded and killed approximately 1,200 Israeli citizens while kidnapping about 250 more. We all awoke to that news, and personally, my initial response was that this provocation was going to render any restraint that Israel had on the Palestinians moot, and that Netanyahu and the Israeli military would just be free to do whatever they wanted. What could Hamas hope to gain? So for the panel, what do you remember thinking in those first moments or days following the Hamas attack?
Like I stated, I didn't know much. So when I saw it on the news, I was thinking like, man, what's this really about? But I knew that these people would not have just done this without reason, right? And so I was in my mind thinking, now what made Hamas do that? What are they trying to communicate? I don't think it was just I was thinking immediately after that this had to be a response to something. And I wanted to know what it was a response to. So for a long time, I was really in the dark. I did not know much. And I'm glad that I went on this trip because I have a deeper understanding of what it was. But that was my initial thought.
Minister Candace, that is absolutely the question. What happened on October 6th and October 5th and everything else? And that's one thing. So when you look at, and again, it depends on what lens you're looking at it. If you look at it through the lens of the Palestinians, the response to what everyone thought was some midnight invasion that was done initially, the response was almost instantaneous. And that leads to a lot of questions. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but the question comes up, did the Israelis know that was going to happen? Because when you look at the response that was launched and compare it to what Hamas did, you think of 1,200 Israelis, and no life, is valueless. So let's be clear on that. But when you think about the fact that 17,000 children have been killed between October 7th and the time that we got there, which was a year later, 45,000 Palestinians, and this is in Gaza alone. This isn't even counting the West Bank. Then you have to ask, is this what Prime Minister Netanyahu was waiting for? As Dara, as you said, was this the moment? And so it's like when you push somebody, and I know we've all been in fights, but when you push somebody and then they push back, and you say, wow, what provoked that? It's easy to talk about what happened the day of. We don't think about what happened the day before, and I know the arrows are gonna fly, but before there was a 9/11, there was a 9/10 and a 9/9. And sometimes we sort of kind of put that to the back burner, but when you're talking about occupation and oppression, sometimes it becomes normal living to some of us, and we don't recognize what's really going on.
Absolutely. While many of us recognize the disproportionality of the Israeli attack, as you mentioned, over 41,000, I had reported Palestinians killed, and many more. If it was 41,000 killed, it's probably 200,000 injured. 1.9 million Palestinians displaced in the Gaza Strip. Many people are going beyond just defining this as a war, and instead defining what's going on as a genocide. I think you heard Reverend Maltrina speak to that. Do you view what's happening in Palestine as a genocide, and why?
Absolutely, absolutely. When you go and you see an entire race of people who are living like that, and you see that their children are, okay, I'll put it this way. We went to Hebron Hills, and Larissa, I think you went with me to the hills. And it was a village of people, and they were constantly, I'm giving you all an idea of what genocide would look like, constantly harassed by settlers, right? These Israeli settlers who just came and moved on their land and built houses, and basically it's like kicking them out, Can you imagine somebody moving in your house, in your backyard, building a house and telling you, you gotta go? And so they would come in all the time and beat the people up. They even killed their village elder. And it was so bad to where the young man told me that the young boys stopped speaking. They stopped speaking. Were you in the hills with us? They stopped talking. And I was like, what do you mean? They stopped talking? I don't know. The little girls was running around and they were laughing and joking, but the boys were not. They were, and they wouldn't even smile. You go like, hi, how you doing? The girls would smile back, the boys wouldn't. They was looking with a curious eye. But to me, they killed the hope in those children, right? They killed their hope for tomorrow. That's genocide. When you can kill a generation and the generation after that and the generation after, that's genocide. And will those boys ever recover? I don't know. But that's what it looked like over there. And so to answer your question, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'll just say that, we hear the phrase in demonstrations, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Netanyahu actually coined that phrase, from the river to the sea. The intent, and this was before October 7th, the intent was, we will rid this land of Palestinians. And so when you think from history, from 1918, the conflicts that have happened in Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, the Palestinian question has been wrapped in there somewhere. One of the reasons that there's this question of Arab versus Palestinian is, if you ask Palestinians, they'll say it's because no one wants to define us as a nation. Because then that means denying Israel as a nation. One of the things that Yasser Arafat first called for was a one-state solution where Palestinians and Israelis could live on the same land. And every Israeli prime minister to that point said, that is not going to happen. The closest maybe was Begin, was the closest that came. But the idea of sharing that land was not going to happen. And because of you have a huge refugee situation there, but the intent is to rid that land of Palestinians. That's a genocide.
Thank you, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, I can't imagine that Hamas would lead a large-scale assault on Israel, not anticipating massive retaliation. That said, I got a couple of questions. One is, do you see events like the October 7th incursion as helpful or harmful to the Palestinian cause? And then secondly, did you talk with anyone supportive of the Hamas attack? And if so, how did they justify it? And importantly, in hindsight, was it worth it?
I'm gonna pass it over to him because they had a conversation and I missed it. They had a conversation with some people and I missed it the first day, so I'm gonna pass it over to you.
So we went to Siderat, which is one of the towns that Hamas went into, and we met with a group, and I keep saying Rabbis for Peace, but I sent you the correction. Rabbis for something, anyway. But one of the persons that we were lectured by talked about this humanitarian effort that they had with Palestinians in Gaza, and we shared toys with them, and and tried to paint this picture of this is an issue that we need to work out, and we just need to talk and cooperate. And Dr. Waltrina just lost it. And she was like, this is not war. War means there are back and forth. This is genocide. This is murder. This is dehumanizing. This is ethnocide. This is everything that we can imagine, and some things that we can't imagine. So to think about whether something could have been achieved, we also have to think about from some of the slave rebellions that we've seen, from some of the actions taken by any liberation force, whether it's South Africa, Mozambique, or whatever. While it may not have achieved the ultimate, you have to take the elephant apart one piece at a time. And it's unfortunate the way the Hamas situation played out, but we can't lose sight of the bigger picture. We're focusing on the trees. We have to look at the forest. And the forest is that we're talking about a land that has been occupied from the time that the Balfour Declaration in 1917 all the way up until 2024. It may not have achieved what some idealists want. And I didn't speak to anybody who justified it. But they said, but you can understand why it happens.
And can I just share this? I can't say that it got the result that they wanted, because I don't know what they wanted. But I will say it did bring attention to what's going on over there. Because I never quite paid attention to Palestine and Israel until the attacks, and it was on the news, and we were watching it. They kept playing it on CNN, and I'm sitting there like, man, what is going on? You know, I'm so into my world, right? And I will say that it did bring attention to what's going on over there. And if that's what their intention was, it definitely worked because it got my attention.
Thank you, thank you. One of your meetings was with the African Community Society in Jerusalem. It's not unusual for people new to conversations about Palestine to not be aware that Africans are a part of that population. This NGO, or non-governmental organization, was founded by the Afro-Palestinian community in Jerusalem in 1983. The delegation met with this group, and I have a few questions about African support for the Palestinian cause. Nelson Mandela once said, "We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians." Do you consider the situation of the Palestinians, even before the brutal retaliation following the October 7th incursion, to be similar to that of apartheid South Africa, and why?
Great question. I'll go back to the quote, a threat to injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And just believing that we all are connected, no matter where we are on the globe, we all are connected. So I do believe that they are similar. I know that Nelson Mandela is a beloved figure in Palestine. They have a huge monument in Mandela Square in the middle of Ramallah. And so it is very, very similar. Very similar. Yeah, there it is. And just if you think about what South Africans went through during their apartheid and still subsequently are going through, it's very similar to what Palestinians are going through in that region of the world. And so we all are a part of this diaspora, right? We might say, oh, well, I'm African, they're Palestinian, I'm American, they're Mexican. No, we're all human, right? And we all are, we can't separate one from another. And that's my thought. I hope that made sense.
Of course. No, I mean, all I can add to that, I'll simply say that, you know, how does the phrase go? We all came over on the same boat, we just got off at different ports.
That's the better way to say it. I like that.
South Africa continues to be a friend to the Palestinians, going so far as to charge Israel with genocide in the International Court of Justice. Tell us a bit about how the ACS currently sees African support in general for the cause of Palestinians.
Well, we were there when the ICJ issued the warrant, and we spoke to, and her name escapes me, I could look it up, but one of the leading Palestinian activist, professor. She was the first woman to be elected to the executive committee of the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. And when that question was asked to her, she said, well, it's about time. You know, so just to put in context, what that means is that any country that recognizes the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, has the right under the UN to arrest Netanyahu if he comes into their country. Of course, the U.S. is not a part of the ICJ, but there are a number of countries that are. And we have seen there's situations where Netanyahu has had to turn down invitations because he could be arrested. Now, you know, what does that mean? You know, it's sort of like, you know, so what, Trump was convicted, you know. But as Candace said, the attention that it brings is so crystal It is so clear that this, even in Israel, people are not that crazy about Netanyahu. And it's not so much the issue of Zionism as much, in favoring him, but it's the issue of peace. There were demonstrations taking place while we were there and here. Bring the hostages home. And the demonstrations couldn't take place where, when we went into the Muslim quarter, the African quarter, it couldn't take place there. But it was clear that the Afro-Palestinians who have been there since 700 BC are not leaving. The majority of them are actually in Gaza. There are only like about 400 in Old Jerusalem. But they are intent on identifying themselves as African and Palestinian, and they identify with the Palestinian cause. Of course, some things have to be muted. At the same time, though, they will not deny the fact that they are part of this struggle.
Thank you. Israel, in general, is strongly supported by the U.S. government, Republicans, Democrats. And this is true in black and white households, by and large. In the past, our civil rights leaders during the 60s supported European Jewish migration into Israel and Palestine, either being silent or supporting the Israeli annexation of land occupied by Arabs and during wars between Arab countries and Israel. With your previous knowledge of the Israeli and Palestinian history and conflicts juxtaposed against your recent firsthand experience on the ground there, do you find a connection between the fight for civil rights and liberation here in America and the fight for liberation in Palestine? Or do you find more similarities in Israel's fight to exist?
Immediately, I identified with Palestinians. I told the group when we were there, I said, man, this feels like Chicago. And my taxi driver was like, what? And I said, yeah, it did. I mean, some parts, especially Jordan, looks so much like Chicago. Debris everywhere, dilapidated spaces and,
Let me just say, Larissa Harris was with us as well.
I was just saying, an example was the brothers holding their hands, warming.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah. I was pulling up and all of this, we had stray dogs, stray cats, and just trash everywhere. And I'm pulling up and I look over and it's a vacant lot with all this rubble, but it was a trash can on fire, and you had about 3 men standing around it, rubbing their hands and warming their hands. And I said, that looks like I'm on 59th Street, It just looks like I'm at home. And then you turn around and you see police watching you, and and they glaring. It's strong, and it's like, man, this feels so much like. I didn't realize, and I, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, that we live under occupation. Oh my gosh. I'm looking at what's going on over there, and I'm like, this is how I live, right? Everywhere I go, you all do our neighborhoods like this, and you're killing our people in the street, and then we turn around and we have this, militarized law enforcement. Oh my gosh. I absolutely identified with the Palestinians. Then I looked at gentrification, right? We have our own neighborhoods where we've been, and this is our home, and we've lived here, and generations have grew up here, and now y'all pushing us out because you want to move in and take over this land. I identify with the Palestinians. Just looking at the schools, and the kids have to walk really far to go to school. You didn't see school buses. What you saw was kids walking really far to go to school for education. Kind of like Chicago, right? You made our schools, and then you have these selective enrollments, and they got to go far to go to the selective enrollment schools that have, the high grades. You know how the CPS grades their schools. And so I identify with the Palestinians. I can go on, but I definitely saw their struggle similar to the struggle of African Americans in this country. Kevin?
Well, I want to try to leave some time because I know folks have questions, and we only have roughly 15, 20 minutes. No, but one of the things that, and I showed the picture to Ed Bowman, one of the things that, to me, put in the context what this struggle is as black folks, is when we were walking through the African part of the Muslim Quarter, going into the markets. And, a whole lot of, you could buy practically anything in there. But that's how a number of them make their living. But the path through the market, and it's pretty large markets, there were, tall buildings, 2, 3-story buildings. But what we couldn't figure out is why there was a canopy that was built over these walkways of metal and then cloth over them. And so when we asked our guide, he said that's because those buildings were taken over by the Israeli settlers. And the Israeli settlers, and I have pictures, would throw garbage, and in some cases they would throw human waste out the windows onto the Afro-Palestinians. Now, think about the way some of our communities, and I'm not saying that we don't participate in it, but when you look at the way cleanup is done, anywhere from snow removal to garbage, you question why the garbage seems to sit in the hood. Again, not excusing what some of us do, but at the same time, though, it is called neglect. Here, in the case of Palestine, it's called ethnic cleansing. You're dehumanized. You are less than human. So to me, anybody who would say that this issue is based in religion, I would say no. This is racism, pure, simple, with a capital R.
So for folks that have questions, please line up at the mic. We have to mic you so that we can hear your questions for this recorded interview. I have one more question for them as you folks do that. In addition to the Afro-Palestinians, there are a variety of African Jews. Most of us are familiar with the Ethiopian Jews that have been migrating to Israel for decades. The first Jewish community was actually founded in Ethiopia around 587 BCE. There's also a community in Dimona, the African Hebrew Israelite nation, which was founded here in Chicago. As an extension of their claim to be one of the 12 tribes of Israel, they were obligated to defend Israel, including serving in the Israeli Defense Force. How does this resonate with you as a black person who supports liberation from occupation and aggression?
Well, if people are not familiar with the African Hebrew Israelite nation, and you've gone to Soul Vegetarian or Vegan Soul, that is owned by the African Hebrew Israelites. And last year, right after the October 7th incident, CRS hosted a panel discussion And we had a young brother, maybe in his 30s, who talked about how there were, he was in Dimona. He talked about how, there's problems on both sides, and what we need to do is come to peace, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I found out that he was an officer in the IDF. There is a TikTok video that has been going around, and I cannot remember the sister's name. Her initials are LL. And she says, unashamedly, unfiltered, I am supporting Palestine. She looks like she could be my sister, my blood sister. I'm supporting Israel, I'm sorry. And, she looks just like me. So here's our dilemma. When we talk about what we can do here, and we talk about Coca-Cola and Fanta and all of the companies that are doing business in Israel, I'm not going to So Vegan. That's me. But sometimes we have to think about how we fund our own oppression.
All right. Okay. Questions?
My question,
Oh, you gotta get, is the mic on?
can you hear me? I don't think it's on. Okay. Hopefully you can hear me. If not, I'll speak real loud. Okay. Kevin, you just said that it wasn't a faith issue. But what I would like to know is, can you just give us some kind of idea what religious background most of these people are? Hamas, Palestine, Afro-Palestinians. What is the common faith base?
So a common faith base becomes a long explanation. What we can say, though, is that the majority of Jewish people that from 1918 up until today are not native to that land. They are from Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and they are from west, from the Iberian Peninsula. And it's important to understand that when the question of faith comes in, because it was around in the late 19th century that this issue of Zionism, actually came up, and this idea of a quote unquote Jewish homeland. There was not much consideration taken not much consideration about the Jewish people that were already there, because some of them were Palestinian as well, and they are not treated any different than the Palestinian Christians or Muslims, or even the non-quote unquote religious people there. So the base, yes, a number of them originated from there, but the majority did not.
First of all, I want to thank Trinity for hosting this, and for the two of you and the others that went on this. Sometimes there's pushback when you touch this issue, and I know you'll have some of that. I go to church often online with Trinity. Occasionally my wife, who is Muslim Palestinian, we come here. And I listened to Reverend Moss this morning, and part of his sermon, he said, sometimes the narrative and the gospel that we preach here, folks don't like it. It doesn't taste good, because we're into liberation theology here. And I want to ask you, the narrative of Zionism controls so much of church theology, Christian Zionism, of our government. How has liberation theology impacted you in terms of your critique of Zionism? And finally, is it okay for churches to take a political stand. This week in Congress, they're going to be voting on between 7 and 8 billion more for Israel to keep the genocide going. 7 to 8 billion. I think as a person of faith, what I spend on taxes is to be evaluated by the gospel. And is this legitimate for us to take a stand and say, maybe this week you need to contact your senators and congressmen and saying, enough. We're funding an annihilation, a holocaust, a genocide in our time. What would you say?
I think you just said it. I think you just said it. How can we add to that? I am human before I'm Christian, right? And I love the Lord. I love Jesus. But I'm human before I'm Christian. And so I can't sit back and watch any human be dehumanized and treated that way. Whether I don't care what your religious beliefs are. The God in me cannot sit back and watch that. So I do believe that we have a responsibility as followers of Christ to take a stand, to say something, to speak out, and to critique anything or anyone who is living antithetical to the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's my response.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And I would just say that given the state of affairs in America right now, there is, when you talk about Christian Zionism, there was a meme that said, people talking about we want to put Christ back in Christmas. And he said, no, I want to put Christ back in Christian. And that's kind of where I would come from. Half of these folks, they're not respecting Jesus' wishes for us. So the fact that they could carry some, fake theology into this Christian Zionism, it's not hard for me to believe that that's what they're supportive of. But it's also hard for me to believe that they don't recognize what Jesus asks of us and implement that into their lives.
Just, if, as faith-based people, we were not to be involved in the politics of this country, then there would have been no need for Jesus to be in human form, walking the earth.
Well, yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marissa, and I'm a visitor here at Trinity. Understanding language barriers and cross-culturally all of the nuances of our environment and their environment, were you all presented with any opportunities for prayer and worship with Palestinians? And if so, can you talk to us about that experience?
Oh, wow. We absolutely had a lot of opportunities where we went to a church, it was in the West Bank, where we were able to meet with some church members, and he told us about his congregation and what they do to support just the community and just his story. I won't go into his stories, but they were heartbreaking. But we were able to, they fed us. I'm thinking we coming over to help them, and they feed us. We went into, the hills, and they fed us. But even in those moments, we were able to pray with them. They even prayed for us as we prayed for them. We were able to pray for UNRWA, the United Nations. Where were we at that day?
The relief workers.
Yeah, the Relief Workers Association. We were able to pray pray there at their headquarters. We were able to pray with Ms. Hanan. She's one of the Palestinian politicians. We were able to pray with her. So it was a lot of prayer going on this trip. And although we may have language barriers, I think what comes from the heart reaches the heart. And we had a lot of those heart-to-heart moments.
Oh, okay. Hi, Marlisa. Thank you guys so much for going on the voyage. Earlier, you guys three mentioned about the October 6th or the October 7th, like when the Hamas, that situation happened. And from my perspective, it seemed like in the media, it was more so focused of like, wow, that happened to like Israel, why Israel? But I noticed if it wasn't for the passionate fighting for our Palestinian sisters and brothers for months and months and months across the country, people were ignoring them, and then it went viral, and then all of a sudden, I noticed months after, the narrative switched in the media. Like, why do you think that is? I guess I'm trying to understand, what is the U.S., I guess, roots in this situation? Because at first they pictured it only for Israel, we being sorry for them. And again, every life is important, so it's still love for Israel. But then all of a sudden, 5 months, because there's a lot of activists here in Chicago and across the country, then it was like, okay, let's look at Palestine. Why do you think that is, from what you saw?
Well, I think one thing to consider, and thank you for that, one thing to consider, in 1967, you know, just about every American was shocked when they heard about how this tiny little country, Israel, was being attacked by these, you know, monsters in the Arab world. You know, Lebanon, Syria. So, you know, just this big attack, and everybody was, you know, really feeling sorry and sympathetic. And the press talked about all the little children that were being killed and whatever. Then the truth came out that neither Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, any of those countries had even the 10th of military power that Israel had by the stockpile that was built by the British, by the French, by the U.S., even though the U.S. said that they were staying out of it. The Soviet Union said they were staying out of it. So it depends on who you listen to. If you listen to the New York Times, you would think that, again, October 7th was this, you know, this nightly, you know, surprise attack, et cetera, et cetera. You listen to Al Jazeera, there are questions of whether this was something that was planned to give Netanyahu the excuse to be able to say, look, we got to get rid of him. It depends on who you listen to. And I think the reason it came out later is because thank God, you had press, independent press, and you had persons who were actually going and witnessing what was going on, which, by the way, Al Jazeera now has been banned in Gaza. So now we question, are we really going to find out what's going on?
No. That's why y'all went. So we're running out of time.
Okay.
I got to get home to see the Detroit Lions game. Oh, no, just kidding. The church is closing at 3.
Okay.
So quick questions, quick answers.
Okay. So I have 2 quick questions. Mehdi Hassan interviewed Cori Bush and asked her, do you regret, this cost you, speaking out for the ceasefire cost you your seat. You got any regrets? And so I guess I'm going to ask you all the question. You've been speaking pretty boldly about justice for Palestine. You got any regrets?
Not at all. Not at all. I don't.
No, I think it's when you lie that you regret it. Truth sets us free.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't have to make up the truth. It's there.
Yeah. Thank you. And because we're all watching what's happening in Gaza, was there any talk about the Christians in Gaza and the church that was almost destroyed and the priests that are helping to shelter Palestinians, whether they're Muslim or Christian in Gaza?
Yes, we saw those. We went to those churches. And we met with the pastors, the priests, and churches that have been torn down, and all we saw was the rubble. We saw that it's a strong Palestinian, a Christian Palestinian community, and they are beautiful, and we stand in solidarity with them.
Thank you.
And, you know, and in reference to Islam, we were in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the third most sacred pilgrimage for Muslims. We saw the bullet holes in the walls, had pictures of the bullet holes of the windows that were broken out when the Israeli soldiers attacked the mosque, thinking that there were Palestinian terrorists in the mosque. This is why people were praying.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My question is, it has been frustrating even under the current administration to write letters, protest, do all the things and not really see anything happen. Having been on the ground and knowing that the new administration is going to be worse, what can we do? I guess is really my question based on what you've seen.
Reach out to our politicians, our state reps and senators. Continue to speak truth to power. You know, the internet is a powerful space, and so just continue to put that out there. I think the more awareness we bring to it and the more honesty we bring to it, I just believe, like he said, truth stands and truth sets us free. And trust in God. My heart breaks for those people. Yeah.
And I would just offer that as we figure out how to respond, that we center our response based on the people that are suffering. So make sure we have the Palestinian community in our conversations.
Thank you.
Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, a number of fast food places that we frequent there's probably no company, multinational company, that does not have ties in South Africa. So we just have to think about it.
My question is for the people who are surviving, especially the children. They are the next warriors. What are we going to do to help them so that they can know how to fight for peace and not retaliating against what has happened to them? Because it's just going to be an ongoing cycle of violence unless we figure out a way to be peaceful and help those children and young adults heal, because they are the next warriors.
Taking pilgrimages like this, the children were so happy to see us. We went to a college and met with some college students, and beautiful, brilliant, and they, they were struggling, hold on to hope. So just seeing people like us and talking to us and letting them know that they are being seen, they are being heard, that encourages them and encourages their hope, and that's what we got to continue to do.
So we're out of time.
Yeah.
I see we have a couple of people here with questions. If you don't mind coming up and just asking your questions directly. Right now, I'm just going to pray us out.
I just had a quick question about the various Jewish groups that actually do not believe that Israel should actually exist in the location that it does. And I was wondering if any of you ever heard of any Arabs or Palestinians who went around preaching that their country shouldn't, that they shouldn't, exist in the area where they are, or in Israel. Because
if there were, we didn't encounter any.
One name of a Jewish group is called Netra, Netreikata. That's just one group of Jewish scholars that don't.
Well, do you mind if I pray first so we can let the people out and the church can do their jobs? And we can talk offline, you and I. Okay, so can we all just gather our hearts and minds? Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to speak about our brothers and sisters in Palestine and to learn more about their struggle. And so, God, I ask that you help us to reveal to us how we can best help them and be the best hands and feet of you in this earth. God, I ask that you strengthen the hearts of the Palestinians. Lord, remind them that you are always with them and that they will never be removed from your love. And so, God, I ask that you encourage us, help us, bless us. Give us strategy on how we can be a blessing. We thank you for all of this. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you all. See you during the rest of the month. You don't stay all this time?